I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the beeping of a heart monitor, not at home, but in a small hospital room, the window fogged, dim light of a December morning seeping through. A nurse spoke gently. "You were brought in after a panic attack." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as cracked earth. I didn't remember ever panicking. Shards of memory cut through like broken glass. Before everything blurred, I had seen a wine glass on the kitchen table, not the one I poured. Dark red, with a few drops left clinging to the rim. On the edge, a smear of pink lipstick I had never used. And Miles's face, smiling, eyes I could still see smiling but frozen cold. He stayed behind me like an actor who had just finished a scene. Why was I here? Why were my own memories altered like a spliced film? Someone had boxed me into a corner I couldn't see a way out of. I shut my eyes, listening to my heartbeat, not only from fear, but from a chilling realization. This wasn't an accident. Someone had written this story. My name is Esperanza Lewis, 35 years old, head nurse at a major hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. My life, at least until recently, was considered by many around me to be stable, admirable. I had been married to Miles for 9 years. He was an accountant, seen by everyone as calm, diligent, soft-spoken. At family gatherings, he often sat quietly, occasionally offering a dull joke that was enough for everyone at the table to nod and say, "Miles is so mature." I once believed that. Even felt proud that the man beside me made my parents and friends so reassured. We lived in a classic house in the suburbs of Raleigh, with a wide porch and dark brown roof tiles, the kind I loved the moment I first stepped inside. I bought that house with my grandmother's inheritance, the strongest woman I ever knew. She left me not just a home, but a private investment fund only I knew about. On the day of the deed signing, she looked at me, her eyes clear yet firm. "This isn't a gift, Esperanza. This is your weapon if the day ever comes you need it." I laughed then, thinking she was overly cautious. I loved Miles, trusted we would build everything together. Who needed a weapon in a marriage built on love and trust? But now, lying in that whitewashed hospital room, I began to see she had looked further ahead than I ever did. My husband's family, in stark contrast, often implied that I was lucky to have Miles. My mother-in-law, Margaret, once smirked at a Christmas dinner, raised her glass, and said in front of everyone, "Esperanza is truly favored by fate." An ordinary nurse, yet she married a reliable accountant like Miles. Well, blessed indeed. I kept my face composed, still carving chicken for my father-in-law. No one in the room noticed me swallowing the lump in my throat. I wasn't easily offended, but the way she stressed ordinary made clear where I stood in their eyes. A woman who had to be rescued by a man seen as rational. And Miles? He never opposed his mother. At most, when we got home, he would stroke my hair and murmur, "Don't mind her. Mom's just blunt. I know who you really are." At first, those words soothed me. But later, I realized they were no more than flimsy bandages covering a wound that only deepened. Our shared life looked proper from the outside. I worked morning shifts, usually leaving by 6 a.m. and returning in the afternoon. Miles worked at his firm, then gradually shifted to working from home. He dedicated the basement to a desk, rows of computers, stacks of files, always neat. Friends who visited often praised, "Miles is so dedicated. Truly the ideal husband, taking care of the finances." I smiled at such remarks, but inside felt a twinge. Because in truth, it was my grandmother's inheritance that gave us this home, that gave Miles his quiet basement office. I never kept score, but I never forgot that fact. On some nights after long shifts, I came home with the sterile scent still clinging to my hair. Miles would be waiting at the table, reheated dinner in front of him. He'd ask a few questions, then drift into talk of numbers, clients, pressures only accountants understand. I sat there, my body aching, still nodding. Perhaps that was my role for 9 years. The wife who listened, trusted, and kept the household steady. I sometimes recalled the day we met. It was at a hospital fundraiser. Miles stood at the financial advice booth, crisp white shirt, navy tie, gentle gaze. He asked if I wanted to learn how to manage my savings as a nurse. I said a nurse's salary wasn't enough to manage. He nodded seriously, as if he saw something valuable in me. That very seriousness pulled me toward him. 9 years later, I still remembered that feeling. But now I also recalled other moments: his deliberate silence when his family belittled me, his avoidance whenever my grandmother's inheritance came up, the fleeting look in his eyes when I asked about the future. I won't claim our marriage was entirely a lie. There were sweet years, weekend trips, quiet movie nights on the couch. But alongside them, a fragile gap formed like a small crack in a mirror that, over time, spread and warped the reflection. Once, when I opened his desk drawer looking for a pen, I found unfamiliar financial files. Statements tied to accounts I didn't know. When I asked, he said, "Company business, nothing you need to worry about." But now I wonder, had I handed Miles the chance to write an entire story behind my back? I remembered my grandmother sitting on the porch, holding my hand. "Esperanza, what you build with your own hands you must guard. Never think kindness will stop betrayal. The world doesn't work that way." I began recalling the days before I ended up in that stark hospital room. Everything hadn't crashed like a sudden storm. It crept in, like strange drafts slipping through cracks, making my skin crawl without knowing why. At first, I blamed fatigue from long shifts. One evening I came home, set my bag on the table, and noticed our wedding photo on the shelf pushed to the side. I was meticulous, always left it straight. I distinctly remembered fixing it the day before. Miles looked up from his desk, frowned like I was fussing over nothing. "You probably forgot. You've been pulling night shifts nonstop." Memory gets foggy. I tried to believe him, but unease began to spark. Then one morning, I received an envelope from the local psychiatric clinic. Inside was a prescription for sedatives under my name, lorazepam, a dosage strong enough to disorient anyone. I stopped cold on the porch, staring at the bold print. Patient Esperanza Lewis. I had never sat in a doctor's office confessing anxiety or insomnia. I carried the slip into the kitchen, set it on the table, and asked Miles, "Do you know anything about this? Why is there a prescription with my name?" He shrugged, his voice oddly calm. "Probably a clerical error. You work in a hospital, you know how often these things happen." But the most unsettling came from a neighbor's words. One morning, as I left for work, Mrs. Jenkins, over 60, living across the street, called out, "Esperanza, last night I saw you walking outside around 2 a.m. I saw you in a red robe, standing at the gate for quite a while before heading back inside. Is everything okay?" The night before, I had been on shift at the hospital from 6 p.m. until 7 a.m. I hadn't been home. I forced a thin smile. "You must have mistaken someone else." "I worked all night." She tilted her head, half doubtful, half convinced. "I know. But I'm certain I saw you." Maybe my eyes played tricks. I hurried to my car, heart hammering. Her words haunted me the entire shift. Who had walked in my yard, wearing the same red robe I always wore? The fragments began to stack. Moved objects, strange prescriptions, a neighbor swearing she saw me when I was gone. It all felt like someone was carefully painting a picture, one where I was a woman unraveling mentally. I started watching more closely. One evening after leaving work early, I walked into the bedroom. The nightstand drawer was ajar, inside a half-empty bottle of sedatives. I had never bought it. When I brought it out, asking Miles, he furrowed his brow, then chuckled softly. "You probably picked it up when you were tired and forgot. It's nothing. Don't scare yourself." He said it with such conviction that anyone else might have believed. But I'm in medicine. I know my history. I know my memory isn't that faulty. The more days passed, the less safe the house felt. I woke one morning to find the back door wide open, though I had locked it carefully the night before. I noticed a faint fragrance of perfume in the living room, jasmine, delicate, completely foreign to me. Passing by the basement office, I caught Miles hurriedly switching off his computer screen as I entered, muttering that clients need privacy. I tried confiding in my only close friend at the hospital, Marissa. We sat in the break room at lunch, and I whispered, "Do you ever feel like someone is deliberately staging things against you? As if they want you to believe you're going insane?" "Esperanza, hearing you say that scares me. Are you sure you're not imagining it?" Her question left me speechless. I knew I was lucid. But if even my best friend doubted me, then what was happening had already gone further than I thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to Miles's steady breathing beside me. I thought about his words, his excessive calm, the way he shrugged off every question. I recalled the neighbor's doubtful look, the prescription with my name stamped across it, and Miles's hand on my shoulder telling me, "You need rest." In the dark, I shivered. What if none of this was coincidence but a calculated plan? A script written in advance, with me cast as the wife slowly losing her mind, easy to dismiss, easy to replace? If I didn't uncover the truth, I would drown under fabricated evidence. And the most terrifying part was not knowing how much time I had before everything slipped beyond my control. One cold winter day, with the wind lashing against the porch, I prepared dinner as carefully as always: roast chicken with herb sauce, mashed potatoes, and apple pie, my mother-in-law's favorite. I wanted the meal to pass peacefully, a statement that this family was still warm, still normal. But within minutes I realized I was wrong. As soon as his parents sat down, Miles spoke in a slow, deliberate tone, as if choosing that very moment to announce something important. "I'm really worried about Esperanza. Lately she hasn't been as stable as before." The spoon slipping from my hand and clattering loudly against the plate. "What did you just say?" My voice shook with shock. Miles glanced at his parents, then back at me, feigning tenderness. "I don't want to upset you. But sometimes you forget very simple things. You wake in the middle of the night, wander into the yard, and don't remember it. And then there are sedatives in the drawer you insist you never bought. Don't you think that's a sign we should pay attention to?" My mother-in-law, Margaret, sighed loudly and set her napkin down. "I've been worried for a long time. Esperanza, you need to be honest with yourself. If you're exhausted, let Miles help. You can't keep overworking and deny that you're running yourself into the ground." I was choked. I wanted to scream that it was all orchestrated, that I was being set up. But in that instant, my face flushed hot, my throat burned, and my words burst out like an explosion. "No. I am perfectly fine. All of this is a lie." My father-in-law, Harold, looked at me with a mix of confusion and suspicion. I caught Margaret's quick glance toward Miles, as though my outburst had given her the proof she wanted for his claim. My furious denial made me look exactly like someone unraveling. After that dinner, it felt like a door had shut. My phone would vanish for hours and then reappear on the kitchen counter. My hospital work schedule, saved in my app, was printed and laid neatly on Miles's desk as though a map for him to track my every move. One morning, checking my bank account, I saw strange withdrawals, a few $100s at a time, regular, all under my name. My hands shook as I pulled up the transaction history, trying to remember what I had spent it on. But no, I hadn't made those withdrawals. When I asked Miles, he shrugged, his voice light as air. "Maybe you forgot. You're busy. I'll check with the bank." I searched his eyes for honesty. But Miles's gaze was nothing more than a cold brick wall. In the days that followed, I began to feel watched in my own home. Coming back from work, I'd find my mother-in-law's car outside. She'd enter with the excuse of bringing over some fresh pie. But when I stepped into the kitchen, she was peering into cabinets, her eyes scanning every corner. "I just want to make sure you're still eating properly," she said, her tone laced with implication. Another time, while folding laundry, I realized my familiar red sweater was gone. I tore the house apart, only to find it later hanging neatly on the back door hook, damp with dew. It was the same sweater Mrs. Jenkins had said she saw me wearing when I was wandering outside at midnight. My chest tightened. Who had taken it? Who had worn it to frame me as unstable? I tried once more to speak with Miles, forcing myself to stay calm. "Do you ever feel like someone is trying to make me look unwell?" He chuckled, softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You're overthinking again. That's a sign of stress, too. You need rest." Instead of soothing me, his words chilled me. They sounded rehearsed, like lines from a script. From that dinner on, I faced the skeptical stares of his family, people ready to believe I was a mental burden rather than a loyal wife and daughter-in-law. And day by day, the signs grew clearer that some invisible but very real force was pushing me to the edge. I began documenting everything: my work hours, moments when objects were displaced, suspicious transactions. I hid the notes in a small journal under the lining of my dresser. It was the only way I felt I still held some grasp of the truth. But I also knew a journal could easily be twisted into evidence of paranoia if it fell into the wrong hands. So every time I wrote, my hands trembled yet my resolve held firm. I had to leave a record, or one day they might erase everything, even me. In the first days at the psychiatric hospital, I drifted between half-conscious states. The harsh white fluorescent light, the jingle of keys each time a nurse passed, the pungent disinfectant, it all stripped me of identity. Then I met Dr. Helena Brooks. She appeared in the small room with a faded blue armchair, a thick folder in her hands. Helena was in her 40s, her gaze sharp but not unkind. While other doctors questioned me with scripted lines, "Do you hear voices in your head? Have you ever thought about harming yourself?" Helena simply observed. One afternoon after the nurse left, Helena lowered her voice, almost whispering, "I've reviewed your file, Esperanza. And I don't believe what's written in it." I looked up, my heart pounding, unsure whether to hope or doubt. "What do you mean?" Helena leaned closer, eyes flicking to the door to make sure no one was listening. "There are signatures of yours on multiple prior admissions, but they don't match your handwriting. I worked in forensics for years. I can spot forgery instantly." I nearly broke into tears. For the first time, someone saw the truth. Someone is fabricating this. "You believe me?" Helena gave a small nod. "I do. And I want to help you. But you must stay absolutely calm. If you react too strongly, they'll use that against you to keep you here longer." I swallowed hard. This was my only chance. In the days that followed, we worked together in secret. Helena pretended to review therapies, but in reality she brought me files for us to examine. I saw pages of medical forms, prescriptions, even psychiatric evaluations signed Esperanza Lewis. Each was typed neatly, with a sloppy forged scrawl at the bottom. I never signed these. I still have my legal signature on file at the bank, they can compare. Helena nodded, jotting notes. Then one evening, she handed me a freshly printed packet. At the top was the letterhead, "Morrison and Associates CPA." My breath caught. That was Miles's accounting firm. All the expense reports for my supposed psychiatric treatment had been generated there. "Do you understand what this means? The person behind all this forgery is Miles. This isn't suspicion anymore, this is direct evidence. For years, I had handed trust to that man. Let him control our documents, accounts, believing he did it to protect the family. Now I saw that trust had been the very weapon that made me most vulnerable. Why would he do this? For money?" I asked, my voice breaking. Helena sighed. "It could be more than that. If someone wants control of your assets, declaring you legally incapacitated is the fastest way. He could then become your guardian, with full power." Her words sent an icy chill down my spine. I thought of my grandmother's inheritance, her warning that it was my weapon. Had Miles been quietly planning all along to steal it? Helena placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice softening. "Esperanza, you are not crazy. I need you to remember that. They're trying to make you doubt yourself. But records don't lie. We can trace the evidence." In the days that followed, Helena began gathering more information. She used her connections to verify the signature of the doctor who had diagnosed me with a disorder. That doctor had in fact retired 2 years earlier, which meant every document since had been forged under his name. During a staged therapy session, Helena said to me, "The final piece we need is direct proof that Miles is using these records for financial purposes. I believe you can help. Once you're out, pay close attention at home, especially to the documents in his office." I understood the fight wasn't only to clear my name, but to protect my grandmother's legacy, the very thing he was after. I knew I couldn't leave the hospital by resisting. So I trained myself to breathe slowly, greet the nurses with calm courtesy, and nod whenever the attending doctor spoke. I swallowed the pills they gave me, then slipped them under my tongue and spat them out later in the bathroom. I clung to Dr. Helena's advice. If you want out, they must believe you are stable, obedient, and compliant. 2 weeks later, the medical board concluded my condition had improved. Miles came to pick me up, his eyes glinting with false satisfaction. He wrapped his arm around me in front of the nurse, tender enough to earn a compliment. You really are a devoted husband. I smiled faintly, but inside I was ice cold. I knew he wasn't bringing me home out of love he believed he had won. That very first night back, I went to work. Hidden in my purse was a set of mini cameras Helena had helped me obtain. I chose discreet spots: the corner of the living room ceiling, the crack of the kitchen cabinet, behind a hallway frame, and especially inside Miles's basement office. My hands trembled, but my resolve held firm as though I was weaving my final safety net. 2 days later, I had my bitter answer. That afternoon, I pretended to leave early for work, but parked on the street behind the house. My phone connected directly to the camera system. On the screen, Miles sat across from Natalie Green, the neighbor who had moved in 6 months earlier. I had met Natalie a couple of times on the porch. Golden hair, bright smile, always friendly in her greetings. I had thought she was just a lonely young woman with a husband often away on business. But on the screen, she was no harmless neighbor. She leaned back in her chair, her voice sweet but sharp. As soon as the court confirms she's unstable, you'll control the entire inheritance. Miles's voice followed, low and steady. Like he was discussing routine accounting. I've nearly finished preparing. Just a few more medical records and one more episode and everything will be ours. I shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. All afternoon I remained motionless in my car, eyes glued to the screen. They plotted in detail how to stage more insomnia episodes, how to make small steady withdrawals from my account to paint me as reckless with money. At one point, Natalie giggled. She hasn't suspected anything? Miles shrugged. Esperanza always trusts people. That's her greatest weakness. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. My kindness, my trust turned into weapons against me. The recording lasted nearly an hour, each word slicing deeper. When they rose, Miles placed a hand on Natalie's back, a gesture too intimate to ignore. This wasn't only financial conspiracy. This was betrayal in marriage, in loyalty, in trust. That night, I acted as though nothing had happened. When Miles asked, "How was your day, love?" I answered lightly, "Nothing unusual. Just a bit tired, I'll sleep early." He had no idea his words with Natalie were already saved to a hard drive ready to become evidence. In the bedroom, I sat on the bed hugging a pillow, my heart racing. I heard his footsteps in the basement, then the door closing. The house that once felt like sanctuary was now a stage, casting me as the unstable wife, while he played the concerned husband and she the loyal mistress. I replayed the footage. Natalie's eyes gleamed at the mention of mental health certification. Miles's voice was firm as he promised control of the entire inheritance. I told myself if I wanted to survive, I had to step into their play, but not in the role they had chosen for me. I thought I had reached the lowest point of betrayal watching Miles and Natalie discuss my mental health certificate. But the true shock came on Tuesday afternoon, when I replayed footage from the basement office. Miles was at his computer when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then answered quickly. The voice that came through froze me to the core. "How far along are you?" It was Lucas Harrington, my cousin, the same man who had stood at my grandmother's funeral, bitterness etched on his face when the will declared that the house and most of the investment fund belonged to me. Lucas was 5 years older, always considered the promising heir by the family. He studied finance, worked at a small investment firm, dressed sharply, spoke confidently. I remembered his eyes that day, when the lawyer read my name. The eyes of someone defeated but vowing never to accept it. Now, through the camera, I watched my cousin and my husband converse like longtime allies. "She's starting to suspect," Miles said, tension beneath his calm. "Doesn't matter," Lucas replied. "Let her struggle. What matters is the medical record must be solid enough for the court to deny her any defense. I've had someone on the family council spread word that she's been unstable since childhood. Add the forged documents and no one will stand up for her." Miles sighed, lowering his voice. "Are you sure that once I submit the files, guardianship will be mine?" "Don't worry," Lucas shot back. "By law, as her legal husband, you'll have priority. Once you're on title, your grandmother's fund won't be separate property anymore, it'll be marital assets. And when the dust settles, you'll follow our agreement. I know how to move it into my hands, clean and legal." I heard Miles chuckle, a laugh I had never known in nearly a decade of marriage. I understand. We'll both win. Those two words, "will win," crushed my chest. My marriage was nothing but a piece of their plan. I was just a pawn to be discarded. The next images hurt even more. Miles turned in his chair, coffee in hand, gazing at the window. She still trusts me. She thinks I'm worried about my wife's health. It's like she's handing me the knife herself. Lucas roared with laughter on the phone. Esperanza has always been naive. But don't forget, that naivety is our chance. I couldn't watch anymore. I shut off the screen and collapsed on the floor, face in my hands. Memories surged. Lucas sneering about grandma's favorite, Margaret's frown at the mention of the private fund, Miles's practiced calm whenever I asked about money. Every piece fit into a picture I was never meant to see. That evening when Miles walked into the kitchen, I forced myself to stay calm. He asked kindly, "How was your day? Feeling tired?" I turned away, hiding my eyes. "I just want to rest." He touched my back, a touch that once comforted me. Now it made my skin crawl, like cold steel against flesh. I went upstairs, locked the door, replayed the footage again. I needed certainty that I wasn't delusional. And when Lucas's laughter rang out once more, I knew there was no turning back. That night, sleep never came. One question haunted me: why would blood betray blood? I thought of my grandmother, her warning, "Never let trust become your chains." Somehow she had known. The next morning I brewed coffee as usual, set the table, played the part of the dutiful wife. Miles walked in, kissed my cheek, his calm smile betraying nothing of his call with Lucas. Sitting across from him, I gripped my cup until my knuckles turned white. One thought rang clear in my mind: if they could script the story, then I could rewrite it. Right after that morning shift, I arranged to meet Jordan Miller, an old friend who once worked with me at the hospital. Jordan wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but an IT technician who used to fix the computers and internal camera systems for our unit. We had kept loose contact over the years, and I knew he was one of the few people I could trust now. We met in a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, the kind of place nobody in the neighborhood paid attention to. I sat curled up in a thick coat sipping coffee, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jordan, I need your help. I believe Miles is monitoring and manipulating everything in my life." "Esperanza, are you sure? Do you have proof?" I unlocked my phone and showed him the recording of Miles and Natalie scheming. Jordan gripped his cup tighter and sighed. "All right. Let me see your computer. If it's as you say, I'll find it." That evening I brought my laptop to Jordan's house. He carefully removed the hard drive and connected it to his own device. The screen filled with streams of code. Jordan frowned. "No doubt about it. There's surveillance software installed. It's logging everything: emails, documents, even every keystroke. It only takes minutes for someone to know everything you do. So that means he knows when I search for legal advice, or when I email a lawyer." "Exactly. And whoever did this isn't an amateur. It looks like Miles himself installed it, because it links directly to his administrator account." Jordan leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "Esperanza, you can't use this email or laptop anymore. But don't delete anything, don't change it. Leave it there so he thinks he still has control. If you want to fight back, you have to play out the script they wrote." Yes. If Miles believed I was still as naive as before, he would expose himself. In the following days, Jordan became my silent anchor. He helped me set up a hidden email account, a small burner phone for secret communication. Every video file from the home cameras was extracted, encrypted, and stored safely on his private server, out of Miles's reach. One night, as we sat in my car in an empty lot, we discussed strategy. Jordan opened his laptop and pointed at a login history chart. "Look here. Miles logs into your system often around 1 or 2 a.m. He's probably checking if you're doing anything suspicious." I let out a bitter laugh. "Then I'll give him exactly what he wants to see." From then on, I began typing fake notes on my laptop. I feel my memory fading. Maybe Miles is right, I'm losing control. Or, I'm afraid I'll wander outside at night again and not remember. Enough to make him believe his plan was working. Meanwhile, I kept a real notebook hidden under the floorboards in my bedroom. In it, I recorded everything. camera timestamps, the content of Lucas's calls, Miles and Natalie's schemes. Every detail, every piece of evidence, I saved it. One record for me and for the day I would bring it to light. One evening, while I pretended to be drowsy on the sofa, Miles sat beside me, gently placing his hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure you don't need more rest? You've been working too hard." I let my eyes glaze over, nodding slightly. "Maybe you're right. I feel like I'm not myself anymore." A flicker of satisfaction crossed his eyes. He believed it. Believed I was slipping exactly as he had scripted. Jordan texted me at midnight. "He's swallowing the fake act whole. Keep going, Esperanza. When he feels most confident is when he'll slip." I pulled up the latest video on my phone. Miles and Natalie, sitting close in the kitchen, giggling as they mentioned the day the court declares Esperanza incompetent. I began my own performance with small acts, just enough to make Miles believe everything was going according to his plan. Each night, he carefully set a sedative pill before me in a glass of warm water. I forced a thin grin, pretending to swallow it in front of him. But in truth, I tucked it under my tongue, excused myself to the bathroom, and spat it into a small vial I had prepared. One by one, I collected the pills, marking the dates and sealing them in a zip bag. Helena had warned me, "If you want to turn this around, you need scientific proof. Words aren't enough." Once I had enough samples, I passed them to Jordan, who took them to an independent lab. One afternoon, meeting me behind the hospital in the parking lot, he handed me a thick envelope, his voice hushed. "Esperanza, the results are in. The pills contain a neuroinhibitor, not a standard sedative. Long-term use would cause symptoms resembling memory loss and behavioral disorders." I clutched the paper, my chest tightening. So Miles didn't just want to scare me, he wanted to destroy me. I had to make him believe the drug was working. So I began faking small lapses, leaving my car keys in the fridge, calling Miles by another name, standing blankly in the middle of a room before asking, "Honey, what day is it today?" Once, during dinner with my in-laws, I deliberately looked around in confusion and whispered, "Did we order yet?" Miles immediately placed his hand over mine, eyes showing both pity and triumph. "Sweetheart, we're waiting for the main course. It's all right." I caught my mother-in-law's discreet nod, knowing my act had landed exactly where they wanted. After that dinner, I overheard Miles whispering to his parents in the hallway, "I'm really worried. Esperanza isn't stable anymore. I think it's time to take this to court." I stood behind the door, trembling yet cold inside. But I knew the more he believed, the tighter my trap became. Meanwhile, Helena and I kept our secret communication. I attended her sessions like any normal patient, but once the door closed, we opened Jordan's laptop to access encrypted files. Helena said firmly, "We now have video, audio, and proof from the pills. What we need is legal reinforcement. I know an old friend, an independent lawyer not tied to the hospital or Miles's network. Can you trust her?" I nodded without hesitation. "I don't have any other choice." We met the lawyer in a small office in downtown Raleigh. Her name was Elaine Porter, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes but a steadying voice. I handed her the file, including video copies, lab results, and my journal. Elaine skimmed quickly, then looked up. "Esperanza, this isn't just an attack on your reputation and health. With this evidence, we can petition the court for a criminal investigation while securing your property rights." Hearing that, I felt a weight drop from my chest. For the first time in months, I wasn't only defending, I had real hope of striking back. But I still had to keep acting. That night, when Miles set the pill on the table, I looked at him, feigning confusion. "Honey, did I already take this one this morning? I feel so foggy." He cupping my cheek. "It's okay, darling. You just need to remember I'm here." I pretended to shiver and lean into him, letting him believe I was completely dependent. At the same time, I kept close contact with Jordan. He updated me whenever Miles logged in to check my laptop. "He thinks you're genuinely declining." "Good. But be careful. One wrong move, and he might act faster." I replied, "Don't worry. I've lived in his script long enough. Now I know how to play it through." Day after day, I continued playing the forgetful wife, while quietly transferring every piece of evidence to Elaine. Helena helped build a legitimate medical record, diagnoses from trusted doctors proving I was entirely healthy. Elaine filed for emergency protective measures, waiting for the right moment to strike. One night, thinking I was asleep, I overheard Miles on the phone with Lucas in the basement. "Everything's fine. She's much weaker now. In just a few weeks we can file with the court." Lucas chuckled through the line. "Good. Keep it quiet. Soon the house and the fund will be ours." They didn't know those very words were already copied to the hard drive Jordan safeguarded. A strange power began rising in me, the strength of someone underestimated, yet quietly holding the reins of the entire game. And I knew, the day of my revenge performance was drawing near. The air in the closed courtroom that day felt like a sudden storm sweeping through. Every revelation, every piece of evidence presented made the four walls tremble. My in-laws, who had always believed in the image of their calm, rational son, sat nearly frozen. Margaret clutched her chest, crying out in disbelief, "No, this can't be. My son, he couldn't have done such things." Harold, my father-in-law, tried to remain composed, but his trembling hand pressed against the table. He looked at Miles, his eyes a mixture of fury and disappointment. "What have you done, Miles? You're destroying not only your family, but your parents' honor as well." Miles opened his mouth to defend himself, but I caught Elaine's eye. My lawyer gave a subtle nod, signaling the technician to play the hidden camera footage. Familiar voices filled the tense room. Miles and Natalie in the kitchen, conspiring about the mental health certificate and the plan to seize the inheritance. The room was stunned. I never looked away from Miles's face. His eyes went blank for a moment, then hardened with rage. "You trapped me!" he shouted, struggling to stand. But before he could say more, the door burst open. Two uniformed officers and a court representative entered, holding a summons and arrest warrant. One officer's voice rang firm. "Miles Morrison, you are under arrest for falsifying medical records, attempted poisoning, and conspiracy to seize inherited assets. You have the right to remain silent until you have an attorney." The cold clink of handcuffs echoed as they locked around his wrists. Miles thrashed, his eyes darting for a lifeline. "Esperanza, how could you betray me? We're husband and wife. Husbands don't poison and destroy their wives, Miles. You betrayed long ago." In the corner, Natalie trembled, her face pale. When the officers turned to her, their voices were stern. "Natalie Green, you will be investigated as an accomplice. You need to come with us." She broke into sobs, tears streaming, whispering weakly, "I didn't think it would go this far." But no one wanted to hear her excuses. Lucas shot to his feet. "This is fabricated. I'm not involved, I don't know anything." Elaine calmly presented another file, including recordings of Lucas's calls with Miles discussing how to legitimize property ownership. The court representative nodded firmly. "Lucas Harrington, you will face civil suits for conspiring to unlawfully seize assets. The law will handle the rest." Lucas's face drained of color as he looked around the room for escape. But every eye, police, lawyers, even my in-laws, was on him. The cloud of arrogance that had cloaked my cousin for years dissolved, leaving only a desperate, exposed man. Margaret turned to me, her voice trembling. "Esperanza, I didn't know. I never imagined. Did you endure all of this alone?" I clenched my hands, holding back tears in front of them. "Yes, mother. And I had to find the truth myself." Harold gave a faint nod, his eyes misting. "I'm sorry. I trusted my son and doubted my daughter-in-law. I can't undo that, but I respect your strength." Miles was led out, shouting empty threats. Natalie kept her head down, tears hidden behind her hand. Lucas sat in silence, lips pressed tight, his eyes seething but powerless to deny. I remained, taking a long breath. The lingering scent of coffee, the white lights above, and a chest that finally felt lighter. The months of suspicion and fear had ended in this very room, under the eyes of the law. After the trial, as the courtroom doors closed, I stepped outside like someone who had walked through a storm. The March wind whipped around me, but inside I felt rare stillness. The court's decision was clear. The classic Raleigh house and my grandmother's entire inheritance fund remained mine, untouchable. Hearing it, I didn't cry as I had imagined. I only let out a long breath, as though returning every stolen breath I had held during the trap. Miles was taken to federal prison, sentenced to years for falsifying medical records, poisoning, and conspiracy. I no longer felt anger, only strangeness at seeing the man I once shared a bed with now bowing in an inmate's uniform. Lucas collapsed quickly. Civil suits piled high, bankrupting him until he sold both his luxury condo and his small firm he once boasted about. Natalie vanished from the neighborhood like a shadow, leaving behind an empty house and neighbors whispering about a woman who bet on the wrong hand. As for me, I returned to the hospital, putting on the white uniform and the badge reading Esperanza Lewis, RN head nurse. Patients, colleagues, even old friends looked at me differently now. They didn't know the details, but they knew I had survived a war. I became proof that survival sometimes comes not from medicine, but from standing tall when the world tries to push you down. But I didn't stop there. I remembered my grandmother's words. Money isn't only to keep, it must protect what's right. So I founded a new fund, the Rose Foundation, named for her. It provides legal and emotional support for women trapped in marriages, those financially controlled, falsely accused of mental illness, or isolated from community. I used my experience to draft real scenarios, hired Elaine and Dr. Helena as advisors, ensuring anyone who knocked would never feel alone again. At the opening, I spoke before a small group of reporters and friends. I once thought I was just a nurse, caring for patients day by day. But I've learned that sometimes we must save ourselves too. And no one should have to do that alone. Applause followed, not loud but genuine. I saw Helena in the crowd, her eyes encouraging. Jordan raised a thumbs up, his smile full of pride. That evening I returned home. The yellow porch light shone on the backyard garden where my grandmother once planted rows of chrysanthemums. I walked slowly along the gravel path, stopping by the old wooden bench. In my hand was her chipped ceramic cup, simple but warm. I had kept it for years as a keepsake. Now I held it as if holding her hand, the woman who taught me strength is not the absence of falling, but rising after losing everything. Beyond the fence, the neighborhood was quiet. No more prying eyes, no more whispers of doubt. Only me, the house, the garden, and an open future. I knew challenges lay ahead, but this time I walked forward not with naivete, but with the wisdom and courage my grandmother had instilled in me. And each time I looked at that old ceramic cup, I remembered there are things no one can steal: memory, resolve, and the right to write your own story. My life had spun through a vortex with no exit, until I realized, sometimes the closest person sets the deadliest trap. And in those moments, we discover where true strength lies, not in endurance, but in the will to rise and protect ourselves. I share this journey not to reopen wounds, but to remind you, any of us could be cast in a play we never agreed to. What matters is the choice you make when you realize you're only a character in someone else's script. Do you let them keep writing, or do you take the pen and change the story? I want to hear your thoughts. If you were in my place, framed, slandered, even harmed by those closest, how would you respond? Would you stay silent, endure, or would you fight back, as I did? Share your feelings in the comments. Every story, every opinion can inspire women going through the same ordeal. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel for more journeys ahead, stories about family, about trust, and the lessons hidden behind betrayal. Because maybe within these stories, you'll find yourself or the strength to change your life in the way you truly deserve.